The dollar does not rule the world because people love it. It rules the world because the system is built around it. Most people imagine currency dominance as a popularity contest, a matter of trust or reputation. But the truth is far colder. The dollar is not powerful because it is chosen. It is powerful because it is unavoidable. To understand why, it is necessary to forget what money looks like in everyday life. Cash, cards, prices, salaries, these are surface effects. Real monetary power lives underneath, in settlement systems, trade flows, debt structures, and institutional habits formed over decades. The dollar dominates not at the checkout counter, but at the point where global transactions are cleared and obligations are enforced. The modern dollar system is born out of crisis, not design. After the Second World War, much of the world lies in ruins. Industrial capacity is destroyed, currencies are unstable, and trust in national money is weak. The United States emerges from the war not only intact, but expanded. Its factories are running, its gold reserves are unmatched, and its financial system is functional. In that moment, the dollar becomes a solution before it becomes a weapon. Countries need stability. Trade needs a reference point. Reconstruction requires long-term financing. The dollar fills all these roles at once. It becomes the unit in which contracts are written, debts are denominated, and reserves are held. Not because it is perfect, but because nothing else is ready. This early advantage hardens into structure. Once contracts are written in dollars, switching becomes expensive. Once debts are owed in dollars, earning dollars becomes necessary. Once reserves are held in dollars, abandoning them becomes risky. Each use reinforces the next. The system feeds itself. Over time, the link between the dollar and gold disappears, but the dominance remains. This is one of the most misunderstood moments in monetary history. Many assume that removing gold backing should weaken the dollar. Instead, it strengthens it. The dollar no longer promises convertibility. It promises access. Access is the real currency. Access to markets. Access to trade. Access to liquidity in times of crisis. When panic hits, institutions do not ask for gold. They ask for dollars. This behavior is not ideological, it is practical. Dollar markets are deep. Dollar instruments are liquid. Dollar clearing is global. Every major commodity is priced in dollars. Oil, gas, metals, grain. The basic inputs of modern civilization move through dollar channels. This creates a constant global demand for the currency. Countries must earn or borrow dollars simply to function. Even those who oppose the United States still need its currency to trade with each other. This is the paradox at the heart of dollar dominance. The system does not require loyalty, it requires participation. A country can criticize Washington, sanction its allies, or pursue independent policies, and still rely on the dollar every day. Opposition does not equal escape. The dollar's power deepens through finance. International lending is overwhelmingly denominated in dollars. Corporations borrow in dollars. Governments issue dollar-linked debt. When conditions tighten, the burden increases. Exchange rates move, interest costs rise, and entire economies feel pressure without a single law being passed. Monetary policy in one country becomes economic reality in dozens of others. This is not conspiracy. It is arithmetic. When the United States raises interest rates, capital flows toward dollar assets. Emerging markets experience outflows. Currencies weaken. Debt servicing costs increase. Crises appear local, but their trigger is external. The dollar transmits pressure silently and continuously. Yet the most powerful aspect of the dollar is not financial, it is legal. Most dollar transactions clear through systems under American jurisdiction. Banks that touch dollars touch the United States. Even foreign institutions become subject to American rules simply by participating. This gives Washington a unique form of leverage. It does not need to control every transaction. It only needs to control the system they pass through. This is where the dollar becomes an instrument of power. Sanctions do not work because of force. They work because access can be denied. A bank can be cut off from dollar clearing. A company can lose the ability to settle trades. A country can find itself isolated not by blockade, but by compliance. The brilliance of this system is its invisibility. No army enforces it. No border marks it. Institutions enforce it themselves to avoid risk. Compliance departments become front lines. Lawyers replace soldiers. Fear of exclusion replaces threat of invasion. Attempts to challenge the dollar appear regularly. Alternative currencies are proposed. Trade agreements bypassing dollars are announced. New payment systems are launched. On paper, these efforts look impressive. In practice, they struggle against inertia. The problem is not ideology, it is scale. To replace the dollar, an alternative must offer everything the dollar offers at once: liquidity, stability, trust, legal clarity, and crisis support. Partial solutions fail because the system is interconnected. You cannot exit one layer while remaining in others. Even rivals of the United States accumulate dollar reserves, not because they admire American policy, but because reserves must be usable in emergencies. In moments of stress, markets do not experiment. They retreat to what they know will work. That places the dollar. This creates a strange global dependence. Countries resent the system but rely on it. They seek autonomy but fear disruption. The result is not rebellion, but hedging. Small adjustments at the margins, not structural change. The dollar also benefits from perception. It is seen as the default. Defaults are powerful because they require no decision. To choose something else, one must act. To stay with the dollar, one does nothing. In systems, doing nothing is often the strongest force. Crucially, the dollar's dominance does not require constant American competence. Even policy mistakes rarely threaten the system. Crises that begin in the United States often strengthen the dollar rather than weaken it. Capital flees uncertainty and runs toward liquidity. The dollar benefits from its own disasters. This reinforces the illusion of inevitability. The more the dollar survives, the more unchallengeable it appears. The more unchallengeable it appears, the more it is used. Usage creates dominance. Dominance creates usage. The system is not static, but it is resilient. Change will not come from announcements. It will come from slow shifts in trade patterns, financial architecture, and political alignment. Even then, the dollar is unlikely to disappear. More likely, it will share space rather than surrender it. For now, the dollar owns the world not through force or trust, but through structure. It sits at the center of a web that connects trade, finance, law, and crisis response. Pulling away from that web requires more than desire. It requires building an entire alternative universe. That is the secret truth behind currency number one. The dollar does not dominate because it is loved. It dominates because leaving it is harder than staying. And as long as the global system rewards convenience over independence, the dollar will remain where it is, at the center of everything. There is another reason the dollar dominates the world, and it has nothing to do with economics in the narrow sense. It has to do with habit. Systems are not rebuilt every year. They are inherited. The dollar system has been inherited by multiple generations of policymakers, bankers, traders, and institutions who have never known anything else. For them, the dollar is not a choice. It is the environment. Every financial professional is trained inside this environment. Accounting standards, risk models, contracts, insurance frameworks, and compliance rules are all designed around dollar assumptions. Even when transactions occur between non-American entities, the logic underneath often remains dollar-based. This creates a self-reinforcing professional culture where alternatives feel experimental and dangerous. The dollar also benefits from fragmentation elsewhere. Other major economies are large but divided. Europe has a shared currency without a unified fiscal authority. China has scale but not openness. Japan has stability but limited reach. No rival offers the same combination of size, openness, liquidity, and legal predictability. Each competitor lacks at least one critical element. This matters because global finance does not reward perfection. It rewards reliability. Participants do not ask which system is morally superior. They ask which one will work under stress. The dollar has already answered that question multiple times. Each crisis becomes another proof of concept. The structure of global trade further locks this in. Supply chains stretch across continents. Payments move through correspondent banking networks. Trade finance relies on standardized instruments. The dollar sits at the center of these mechanisms, not by decree, but by convenience. Changing the unit would require rewriting millions of contracts simultaneously. No one coordinates that kind of shift. Another overlooked factor is debt psychology. When debts are denominated in dollars, repayment becomes a national priority. Governments adjust policy to secure dollar inflows. Exports are promoted. Reserves are accumulated. Domestic decisions are shaped by external currency needs. The dollar quietly disciplines behavior without issuing commands. This discipline extends into crisis management. When economies face sudden shocks, access to dollar liquidity becomes critical. Swap lines, emergency lending, and market interventions stabilize systems in minutes rather than months. The existence of this backstop thus changes expectations. Markets assume it will be there. That assumption reduces panic and reinforces dependence. Critics often point to weaponization as the dollar's weakness. Sanctions, asset freezes, and financial exclusion are seen as incentives to abandon the system. In theory, this makes sense. In practice, it often produces the opposite result. Faced with instability, actors cling more tightly to what they know will function. Attempts to build alternatives frequently underestimate this psychology. New systems promise independence, but they lack history. They have not been tested under stress. They have not survived crashes, wars, or systemic failures. Trust is not declared, it is accumulated. The dollar has accumulated it over decades. The result is a world where dissatisfaction coexists with dependence. Countries complain about dollar dominance while expanding dollar reserves. Leaders criticize the system while issuing dollar debt. This contradiction is not hypocrisy, it is constraint. The dollar also benefits from something deeply human: risk aversion. Large institutions are not rewarded for bold innovation. They are rewarded for avoiding mistakes. Choosing the dollar is never questioned. Choosing something else always is. This asymmetry freezes behavior. Even digital innovation does not escape this logic. New technologies promise disruption, but they often integrate into existing frameworks rather than replacing them. Digital rails still settle into dollar values. New platforms still price risk in dollar terms. Innovation adapts to dominance rather than destroying it. Over time, the dollar becomes less a currency and more an operating system. It runs in the background. It sets defaults. It defines parameters. Users interact with the interface without seeing the code. Only when something breaks does the structure become visible. This is why predictions of the dollar's imminent collapse repeatedly fail. They assume that dominance is a matter of confidence alone. In reality, it is a matter of architecture. Architectures decay slowly. They are replaced only when alternatives are fully built, not merely announced. Eventually, the system will change. No structure lasts forever. But change will come as layering, not replacement. New currencies will coexist. Regional systems will grow. The dollar's share may shrink. Yet even in decline, it will remain central because the cost of exit remains high. For now, the dollar owns the world because it organizes it. It connects actors who do not trust each other. It standardizes interactions across borders. It absorbs shocks that would otherwise fracture markets. It is less a symbol of power than a mechanism of order. That is the deeper truth behind currency number one. The dollar does not dominate because it is enforced. It dominates because it makes everything else easier. And in a world that values efficiency over independence, ease over autonomy, and stability over freedom, that advantage is almost impossible to overcome. Another reason the dollar maintains its position is the way global institutions are built around it. International organizations, development banks, and financial regulators operate using dollar-based frameworks. Reports, stress tests, and balance sheets are calibrated to dollar assumptions. This creates an environment where deviating from the dollar introduces friction at every level. Even well-intentioned reforms struggle against institutional inertia. Over time, rules designed for convenience harden into constraints. What begins as efficiency becomes dependency. The dollar also benefits from predictability. Legal outcomes, bankruptcy procedures, and dispute resolution within the dollar system follow relatively consistent patterns. Investors value this consistency more than favorable terms. Knowing how a crisis will be handled often matters more than avoiding the crisis itself. In uncertain environments, clarity becomes a form of safety. The dollar provides that clarity through long-established legal and financial norms. Alternatives may offer autonomy, but they rarely offer predictability at scale. Another overlooked element is the role of education and expertise. Economists, bankers, and policymakers around the world are trained using models rooted in dollar-centric assumptions. Textbooks, simulations, and risk assessments all rely on dollar benchmarks. This shapes how problems are understood and which solutions appear reasonable. When a system defines the language of analysis, it defines the limits of imagination. Escaping it requires more than political will. It requires intellectual reinvention. The dollar's dominance also reshapes geopolitics indirectly. Alliances form not only around security, but around access to liquidity. Countries with dollar access enjoy smoother trade, cheaper financing, and greater crisis resilience. Those without it face higher costs and volatility. This creates incentives for alignment that are subtle but powerful. Formal treaties matter less than financial compatibility. Over time, economic gravity pulls political decisions along with it. Crucially, the dollar system rewards gradualism and punishes abrupt change. Sudden attempts to abandon the dollar often trigger instability. Capital flees, exchange rates swing, inflation accelerates. These outcomes are then cited as evidence that alternatives do not work. The lesson reinforced is caution. Reform becomes incremental, slow, and easily reversible. The status quo survives not because it is perfect, but because change appears dangerous. Finally, the dollar benefits from silence. Its dominance is rarely debated in everyday life. People experience prices, wages, and trade without questioning the unit beneath them. The absence of friction creates invisibility. What is invisible is rarely challenged. Power that does not announce itself often lasts the longest. And as long as the dollar remains the quiet default of global exchange, it will continue to shape the world without needing to rule it openly.